Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to start with some introductions. I'm going to start by introducing Rachel Nunez. Rachel is a licensed professional counselor supervisor and a licensed chemical dependency counselor in the state of Texas. Rachel is the owner of Lagniappe Counseling and Community Services in Wylie, Texas. She has been working with children, adults, and families in private practice for 9 years and has spent over 25 years in the counseling field. She has a passion for walking the journey with those struggling with anxiety, depression, addiction, grief, trauma, and life transitions. I will now introduce myself. I am Dr. Jaquavia Demas. I am a Houston native. I have a background in medical social work. That is my first career, but my passion is mental health. And so outside of being a licensed social worker, I'm a licensed chemical dependency counselor and also a licensed professional counselor. I specialize in Alzheimer's and dementia, also in trauma therapy and working with anxiety, depression, and troubled LGBTQ youth. I'm the owner of Mentally Fit Therapeutic and Recovery Services, where I provide services to youth and all ages of adults. So nice to meet everyone. Next, I will introduce our panelists. Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Andrew Martinez. Andrew Martinez is a licensed social worker who works at a private practice for CMBHS, a state-run group home. He has attended both individual and marriage therapy. Andrew said therapy made him feel heard and not judged. He also learned skills to help him in everyday life. He is currently looking for a new therapist to start with at this time because it helped him in the past to gain new perspectives on life and that it is okay to make mistakes and you are not defined by those mistakes. He says therapy is not a sign of weakness. It is a very powerful tool we could all use. Welcome, Andrew. And then we have Mr. David Rice. Mr. Rice works in corporate finance and revenue operations. Dave is currently in therapy and has been for almost 2 years now. Dave says he finds therapy extremely helpful and it has helped him better understand how his depression and anxiety are impacted by the way he perceives the world around him, his cognitive distortions. Therapy has taught him techniques to help identify his faulty thinking and change his perception. Dave says therapy helped him gain understanding of how his brain works and sometimes works against him. He takes medication and uses skills he has learned in therapy to help get through highly anxious and depressive episodes, and in some cases, avoid the thoughts altogether. Welcome, Dave. Next, we have Mr. Eddie Trauber. He is the owner of Faith Walks Counseling and is a licensed marriage and family therapist who also supervises therapists in getting their licensure. Eddie has over 30 years of counseling experience and works with men in all stages of life who are dealing with a wide variety of issues. Welcome, Eddie. And then we have Mr. Jerome Barber. He is a licensed chemical dependency counselor. He is internationally certified drug and alcohol counselor, a qualified substance abuse professional credentialed by the National Association of Addiction Professionals, a certified recovery support peer specialist, a peer support specialist supervisor, and a certified anger resolution therapist. He is the chairman of the Winner Circle Peer Support Network of Texas. Jerome has worked in the field of addiction therapy for 6 years and has found it to be quite rewarding when having the opportunity to work with those who have suffered with the same dysfunctional lifestyle as he once had. He works with youth with co-occurring disorders and the formerly incarcerated and those seeking to reintegrate back into society after incarceration. He has attended therapy and still sees a therapist on occasion. One thing he says he gained from therapy is the ability to forgive himself and others. Thank you, Jerome. Okay, and so now we'll have a keynote speech by Mr. Eddie.
Thank you, Dr. Demas. As she said, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in private practice for over 30 years here in the great state of Texas and do a lot of public speaking and teaching. And have a new ebook coming out in the next week or two if anybody's interested. It's called The Everyday Overcomer, High Performance for the Hurting and Healing. And it takes principles from highly successful people and applies them to everyday people who are struggling with a variety of mental health issues to work with those and become better. If you'd like a free copy, you can shoot me an email at eddiethecounselor@gmail.com, and I'll send you a copy as soon as it's finished being edited. I do want to thank you for being here today, whether you're a father, a brother, husband, friend, professional, or just someone simply on your own journey. Your presence here really matters because we're not only going to talk about men's mental health, but we're going to talk about the challenge of the silence that too often surrounds it. And let me start with something simple, but pretty powerful. And that is that men hurt. Now, that shouldn't be a revelation to anyone. But men experience grief, anxiety, trauma, depression, burnout, physical issues like heart attacks. We have addictions, loneliness, self doubt, and quite often the pressure to perform. And yet, many men have never been given the space, permission to really say those words out loud. We don't talk enough about how the silent suffering shapes our lives. It impacts relationships. It affects fathers who want to connect with their kids but don't know how. It affects husbands or partners who shut down instead of speaking up. It affects coworkers who carry invisible burdens behind this professional mask. And to be real with you, let me share a little bit from my own past. About 14 years ago, my family had a really rough year. Both my father and my father-in-law had been sick for several years with life-threatening issues. And that year, my wife's dad passed away. And then 2 weeks later, my dad passed away. And about a month and a half later, my wife's grandmother passed away. And, it got to where we were afraid to answer the phone because you didn't know who had died next, right? It was a really difficult time for our family. We hadn't even recovered from one loss, and we're going to another funeral and then another one. And in the midst of all that loss and pain, you got to keep everything else going. I mean, you've got to go to work, you got to pay the bills, you got to get the kids to school. And the good news is that I was a trained professional. I'd spent years counseling people through grief and loss and issues like this. I was trained in crisis counseling and critical incident stress management. So what did I do? I put my emotions in check and put my needs aside and jumped right into action. I was there for my wife and her family during their time of loss. I took the lead for my mom in putting my father on hospice, and I was there when he passed away. I helped to plan 3 funerals. I was strong for my wife and my kids and the rest of the family at her grandmother's funeral. And it was a stressful time, but thankfully, with all my years of counseling and specialized training, I was able to get through it, exhausted, but otherwise unscathed, until 6 months later. And I woke up one morning with intense stomach pain. I remember my wife driving me to the hospital and literally screaming out in agony like my gut was on fire. And I've had chronic pain most of my life, but I had never felt anything like this before. They admitted me into the hospital, and I spent a week there while they ran almost every test they could on me. And after about 4 days, it occurred to me, well, I knew what was going on, that I had swallowed all this pain and grief earlier in the year, and now my body was letting me know that it wasn't okay with that. I had a stomach ulcer, and I got medical treatments and began to open up and share what was going on with my close friends, and I began to heal. So, lesson learned. Just like me, many men struggle and suffer in silence, and they channel their pain into things like anger or isolation or substance use or physical illness rather than being open about it. Thankfully, in my case, it didn't happen, but for many men, if this silent suffering continues, it can lead to suicidal ideation. In fact, the statistics on that are staggering. And this is from the CDC and the National Institute of Mental Health. Annually, 5% of US adults, that's 12.8 million, seriously consider suicide. And women report higher rates of suicidal ideation and attempts, but men are far more likely to die by suicide. Men account for 79% of all suicide deaths. This discrepancy, the more attempts by women and more deaths by men, is known as the suicide gender paradox. It exists because men often use more lethal means. And what that means is that men die by suicide nearly 4 times more often than women. And also, another staggering fact is that among men under 45, suicide is the second leading cause of death. These numbers reflect a serious unmet mental health need. In fact, it's widely documented that men are significantly less likely to seek therapy or talk about emotional struggles. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, among adults with any mental illness, and this was in 2022, 41% of men receive mental health treatment, counseling, or medication, which is significantly less than the almost 60% of women who do the same. And then again in 2024, a US survey found that only 42% of men with depression or anxiety had treatment compared to 57% of women. And the numbers stay about the same each year. Why is that? Well, I think it's because we built a culture where men are rewarded for appearing unshakable, even if they're falling apart inside. And it's time to change that. I believe that we need to redefine what strength is. The lie is that strength is silence. The real truth is vulnerability is what strength is. It takes strength to say, I'm not okay. It takes courage to ask someone for help. And it takes resilience to face your past, to sit with your feelings, and to take steps towards healing. Strength isn't about, emotional armor. It's about emotional awareness. It's about choosing to face the reality of your situation and take action to make it better. Real masculinity isn't about hiding or pretending to be tough. It's about being honest. It's about growing. And it's about showing up for yourself and for those that you care about. Now, please understand that I'm not saying that we all have to handle adversity the same way. Every man is different. Things like your culture, your upbringing, your values, your life experiences, they all shape how you view emotions and mental health. But emotional pain, stress, the need for support, that's universal across the board. Well, whether you live in rural communities or cities, whether you're married, single, or divorced, whether you're raising kids or navigating loss, young or old, no matter what your background or your life stage is, you deserve to be supported. Now, a great example of this comes from the men who've served in our military. Back at the close of the Vietnam War, we began to see large numbers of men returning from combat dealing with extreme cases of post-traumatic stress disorder. In fact, the numbers were drastically higher than when men returned from combat after World War II. And so the researchers began to question, why is that? They examined the combat situations to see if they were more harsh. They tried to assess if men were weaker in the 60s than they were in the 40s. They looked at lots of variables to find out what had happened. And after doing all this research, do you know what they found? They found that men returning from combat after World War II, they took a long boat ride to get home. It took from 1 to 3 weeks. And they got back to the States and then they were out processed and they got to go home. But after Vietnam, most of them took a plane ride, usually about 24 hours, and then they were out processed and back out on the streets. What the researchers found was that the men returning from combat at the end of World War II, they sat around and they told their stories to each other. They talked about their life experiences in the war. They bonded. They cried over their losses. They supported each other. The Vietnam vets were back on the streets after an exhausting plane ride and a short out processing time. They didn't get the support they needed. And as a result, we had a whole generation of young men who suffered dearly because of it. You see, we need each other. Women seem to understand and practice that concept a whole lot better than men. But men, we heal through relationships also. We heal through our connections to each other in community, even if that community looks different than you might expect. It might be in a therapist's office. It might be in a small group or a support circle or a 12-step group meeting. It might be with a coach, a mentor, a spiritual guide, or even with a best friend over coffee. The point is that healing happens when men are no longer isolated, when they feel safe enough to speak and be heard, and when someone looks them in the eye and says, you don't have to carry this alone. I'm here for you. Connections really do save lives. So what can we do to work on changing this habit that we have as a culture? Well, here's where we start. First thing is ask real questions. Don't just say, "Hey, how you doing?" as you walk by someone, but really look them in the eye and say, "How are you? What's going on with you?" Show some real concern and listen. The next one, second thing is listen without trying to fix the problems. As men, we're really good at that. We want to jump in and offer solutions up really quick. But a lot of times that's not what we need. We just need somebody to be present and listen to us and be quiet for a while and to just sometimes sit in the dirt with us while we're going through it. The third thing, model openness. If you're a man, lead by example. Talk about what's hard, share what's real, demonstrate vulnerability. That's the only way this changes. Number four, challenge harmful norms. If you're hearing somebody talk and they're using language that shames men for being emotional or perpetuates these harmful beliefs, call them out on that. Don't let it continue. The fifth thing I would recommend is support access to care. Encourage that men go to therapy, that they go to support groups. You can step in and advocate for affordable, stigma-free resources, recommend books or other things like this course they could go to. We're doing better than ever at offering men quality resources for emotional help, but we got a long way to go. And most importantly, I think just remind men that it's not just okay to get help. It's wise, it's strong, and it really is necessary. Think about this. What if the next generation of boys didn't have to unlearn what we had to unlearn in order to survive and to thrive? What if they grew up in a world knowing that strength looks like honesty, transparency, vulnerability, connection? What if they saw role models who asked for help and got stronger because of it? That's the legacy that we have the power to build. So start doing that now. To every man listening to this, I want you to know you don't have to prove your strength through silence. You don't have to carry your pain alone. You're allowed to feel it, to cry, to grow, to ask for help, and to heal. There is no weakness in taking care of your mental health, guys. There's no shame in prioritizing your peace. Let's commit together to rewrite the narrative for ourselves, for each other, and really for generations to come. I want to challenge you right now to break the silence and live as an example of strength through vulnerability.
Thank you, Eddie. Rachel, do you want to start with the?
Yes. So we're going to give you guys some questions to give us feedback on. One, to help us. That's why we wanted to offer this out to the community. But two, to hear from men and just to be able to give this information out to others. So I'll start with, what are the biggest mental health challenges do you think are facing men today? What are some of the big ones?
Depression, anxiety, just speaking from my own personal experience. I don't know if you want to, mental health being, this ability or this preconceived notion that we're, I think Eddie, you touched on this, that we're the main providers and, caregivers, and we need to be the strong rock for the family, so maybe that misconception there is driving this, but that's my own personal experience, and feeling the pressure of having to, live up to the full, expectation of being the sole provider. And I'm not, my wife works too, but like being the sole provider and the strong one in the family, and the one that can, everybody can go to for support, and yet I need support myself is exacerbates the anxiety and the depression. So I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know if that was exactly what you're looking for.
No, absolutely. Does anybody else have anything? Do you guys feel
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is Jerome. I was gonna say, in African American, most black men feel trapped. They feel like they're trapped, and they don't want to ask for help. I've been included in that number. Just with all the things going on, you just feel trapped and just and needs an outlet, but too afraid to ask for it. So I don't know what you would term that mental wise, but yeah, that's what I see. I mean, I see it all around me with my colleagues and comrades, and as I said, I was once there. You know, we're too proud to say, "Hey, man, I need a way out, and I need something to do." For me myself, you know, I practice self-care. I play the piano. You know, play with my dogs. I got a lot of little things I can do, but those things are a little too uh, not masculine for most black guys. They're not gonna play with a dog, and they can't play the piano. So I can understand where they are, but I'm grateful that I'm not there anymore. But that's what I see. Thank you.
Good. Do you all think that men understand what depression and anxiety are and the warning signs and what that looks like?
I think the hit and miss on some areas of that. I think they're kind of aware of it, but going back to like the first question, it's a sense of pride where they don't want to be perceived as weak or don't want to be perceived like they have issues going on. I see that a lot in the private practice. And so again, I know with me, when I was kind of struggling with going back and forth into therapy, I knew that I somewhat had anger issues, but I was still kind of that placing blame on others. Like, oh, well, if they didn't say this, then I wouldn't have lost my control. Or if this worked out this way, then I wouldn't be so angry all the time. Where in the reality, I was an angry person. That was what it was. And I didn't really figure that out till I was in therapy and was talking about that. And then it just kind of hit me that the realization of like, wow, like this actually helps. And, you know, also too, that the negative kind of the view we have of therapy until you go to it, you kind of have either what you've seen on TV or how it's displayed in movies where you have to go to therapy because you're crazy. And it's not even that, like it's nowhere even close to that. I always tell new incoming clients of mine, my therapy sessions are just conversations. That's what we're having, is a conversation. So again, getting past some of those negative views of it and being able to talk about it, and then being kind of accountable where areas you need to work on for sure. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I think most men, when they come into counseling, well, first of all, it's a big step for most men just to go to counseling, period. Right? I mean, that's admitting, hey, I have a problem, I need help. Once they get there, yeah, if they are able to vocalize what's going on with them, sometimes it is a pride issue that I don't want a label of depression. I don't want, you know, to have to tell my friends or my wife or my family that I'm struggling. And so, yeah, I think that plays a huge part in it. Can they identify that they have issues like depression? I think they're probably going to say, you know, I'm just not feeling really good. I don't have very much energy. I've lost my get up and go. And when you really begin to unpack that and say, okay, these are all symptoms of depression. Oh, really? I didn't know that. So I think sometimes they're unaware that that's the case.
I want to add one comment there is, you know, my dad made a comment to me when I was hitting, I mean, a very low spot where I for weeks I didn't want to live anymore. Like I was done. I prayed for death. I mean, so I'll just sharing that to say this is the level of depression I was at. And he goes, you know, some days you're just gonna have bad days and you got to pick yourself up. And it was like, that's not what this is. This isn't like, I think there's a misconception on, oh, he's just feeling down, like, oh, his dog died. And, you know, I think the definition of depression escapes people, or maybe isn't fully understood unless you've gone through, and mine, I think, was chemically driven. I had been switching medications and it did not go well. And I mean, it was a horrible time of my life. And just, I remember being frustrated with, how do you articulate something to somebody that, you know, and it's hard for me to say, and maybe he has gone through it and I don't know it, but I felt with the comment that he made that he has no idea the depth of depression I was in. Like, it wasn't just, oh gosh, I'm having a bad day, and pick myself up and work through it and it'll get better. I mean, it'd been weeks and weeks and weeks of waking up and going, you wake up to the nightmare, right? And sleeping's the escape, or other things are an escape. So I don't know if that quite adds this. Sorry. I'm trying to give context to, or at least just my experience with it. And I feel like maybe it's misunderstood. And so, you know, I don't know. That's where I struggled with it. And then when, as far as I know this is probably playing into one of the next questions is, you know, as far as opening up to it, it's like, well, how do I articulate that to somebody? How do I explain to somebody like, no, this isn't just having a bad day. No, it's not. I've had people that I've loved die. I've had animals die. That's sad, but this is literally 10 times worse. Like at least my experience with it. So.
Dave, I think you're right. It does kind of lead into the next question.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped ahead.
Well, no, because I think that one thing you said was you weren't sure if your dad had experienced depression before, and he just didn't know what to say. But I think that that's what it is. A lot of times, people truly just don't know what it is or what it can look like, and that it's not a one shoe fits all kind of thing. It's going to look different for everybody because, especially for men, because most men, right? Not all, but most men are taught to, you're a man, you're fine. Everything is fine. You provide, you suck it up, you get it together. And so generations, this is what men are being taught. So now I'm over here literally fighting for my life. I feel like I'm dying, but God forbid I say something, because I'm not going to have my family thinking I'm weak. I'm not going to have my wife thinking now she has to take over the house, and, maybe I need a couple of days off of work. And, like I can't do that. I can't have my kids, my boys thinking that, oh, daddy's a girl because he's sad. Because, and so I think the question now is, how can we begin to break the stigma surrounding men's mental health in our community? No matter what our community is, like, how can we begin? Because I know that it will look different across communities, right? But where can we begin? How can we begin to break that stigma surrounding mental health?
I can lead into that one. Sorry, just because you're touching on things with, it got to the point it was impacting my family. It was hard. It was hard when they saw their dad that was normally up doing stuff and working on different things or whatever, who would lay around all day doing nothing, sometimes just staring at the wall, and they didn't understand. And so finally my daughters, who are I won't mention their names, but they're teenagers, young teenagers now, and I explained to them what was going on. Did they understand? No, but I started to socialize it, to make it like it wasn't a stigma. And I said, there's a chance that maybe one of them are going to have mental health problems. And, and for me, it was almost therapeutic because in a way I got to talk about it, but I also got to say, hey, maybe I can help, try to explain what I'm going through. And maybe they'll say, hey, sometimes I feel that way, Dad. And I, as a young man growing up in a house with loving parents, but two brothers that were overachievers, and I was the youngest, I was always too afraid to say, hey, I'm having these problems, because it just wasn't, I didn't feel comfortable doing it. And it was like, I didn't feel like my parents would believe me and whatever. So I lived with it for years. But I wanted to create that environment with my daughters where they could feel like, hey, you can come. I know Dad's going through stuff. Hey, even if I'm not sure if I'm going through something similar, I want them to feel comfortable that they can bring it up, right? And I think that's a big thing, is just not feeling comfortable to bring it up. Like I have friends today that I went dark on for months and months and months at a time, and they'd make a joke on, oh, I haven't seen you around, and what am I supposed to say? Hey, I didn't want to be alive anymore, and why would I go out? Why would I want to do anything? I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't reply to call. I didn't talk to my own family. Like, it's very hard to articulate that in that situation and get the kind of compassion and support when they might not have been going through it themselves. So at least I'm starting like with my family of who sees it day to day, knows something's different. And, even though they may not understand, that's at least one step I'm taking, is like make my close family understand, and that if they do have those same kind of issues, feelings, even if they're doubtful on it, to to bring it up to me and make it comfortable. And then that actually has helped me a little bit too. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anybody else want to chime in with that question?
I think that let's start. It would be a good place to start education. I was 35 when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar disorder, and depression. I was 35. I had been doing things to myself for a long time and didn't know why. I think that once I found out why, then that's when a bigger issue started for me, because I didn't want to admit that I had some limitations. I had, it was like a handicap, like telling me that I had to have a handicap, I had to take the medication, I had to do this, I had to do that. And I was at that age where I wasn't trying to hear that. So for a lot, it's the not knowing what it looks like. I think somebody said that earlier. Not knowing what it looks like, and then when you do, dealing with it. So maybe in a school system, maybe if we spent more time talking about subjects like this, it would help. I mean, talk about so many other types of classes, all kind of stuff going on in schools. I don't see why mental health, some type of education wouldn't be something that, should be tried. Because, I mean, they say depression is a common cold, right? Mental health. And I work with kids that come to school, and you can just see it on their face. You can just see it, but they don't know what's going on with them. They won't openly tell me, but I think starting there would be a good starting point.
I know that would have helped me growing up. So I think that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the education, because that is education, is rehabilitation, in my opinion, how can we create safe spaces for them to express their emotions?
I think honestly, having things like this, in all honesty, having open, honest conversations about, struggling to be leaders of families, or like if we're struggling with meeting expectations that we, others have set for ourselves or we've set for ourselves, and again, normalizing a lot of what we go through in life daily. And it's so funny. I recently had a private practice client. She had told me that she had a death in her family, and she was very close to this individual in her family. And she went to therapy because she was going through a custody battle, and her ex tried to say, oh, you're too depressed to watch our daughter. And I told her anybody who loses a family member is naturally going to go through some level of depression. Like that's, and because she was like, I just need to know if I'm really mentally ill. And I go, well, we're all kind of in a way, and we all kind of go through it in a way, and I told him, if I lost my mother tomorrow, you better believe I'm going to be depressed. And I'm a therapist. You better believe I'm going to struggle. I'm going to go through the phases of grief. We all go through it. And so again, normalizing that that's okay to be sad when we lose a loved one. It's okay to be upset when we have something happen to us that doesn't go our way. It's just how we handle it after that, what we do to move past it. I tell people all the time, I'm an angry person, but I no longer punch walls when I'm angry, and I used to do that. And, it's not nothing that I'm proud of, but I'm glad that I can be angry and not punch a wall anymore. That's because of the work I put in for myself. And so again, normalizing a lot of what we go through daily is to me a big factor. And I do that a lot, especially for men in my private practice. I see a lot of men that have had affairs in their marriages, and now they're trying to work to gain trust back. And a lot of it is, that impossible thing of getting that life they've had prior to the infidelity, where, in a way we kind of know it's never going to be the same, but we can work towards, a better life now that we've had that incident. So again, normalizing it for sure would be my number one thing.
Okay.
And I would say along those lines, doing it wherever you meet with other men. I mean, if you play basketball on Saturday morning with a group of guys, if you watch sports with guys, wherever it is in those environments, it doesn't have to be a special event. It doesn't have to be a big announcement. It's just, hey, I'm hanging out with my friends. We're, shooting some hoops, and afterwards we're sitting around talking. And I tell a little bit, hey, we're having some marriage problems, or hey, I've been dealing with feeling down lately. I'm having trouble at work. It comes with transparency, with honesty, and you don't have to dump the biggest, darkest secret you've got on those guys right off the bat, right? Start small, share a little bit, see how they react, share a little bit more, give them some time, see how they react. And slowly over time, by doing that, you can change the dynamic of those groups to where they're more honest with each other, they're more open, and they're there to help each other.
I think that's a good call out I think I'm in my head, it was like, going from 0 to 100 with, hey, here's how dark it was for me. And like, maybe that's a little too much with the conversation. So I didn't bridge it. Like I just stayed away and didn't say anything, but maybe just, leading into it would have been a better, having patience and getting the conversation starting, letting it sink, like planting the seed and letting them come back with their own like experiences, but like the build up. That sounds like a really pragmatic approach that probably would have helped better with my situation.
Yeah, if two ladies sit down next to each other on an airplane, within an hour, like they're best friends, right? Two guys sit down next to each other on an airplane, and one of them looks at the other one and says, I've been feeling really lonely lately.
Yeah.
What's the reaction going to be? It's probably not going to be great.
Unless maybe if they're drinking.
Yeah. But it starts with like getting to know each other and opening up a little bit, and then sharing just a little bit, see how they react. And then, like I said, just kind of test the waters.
What would you all say are some like practical self-care and stress management techniques that have worked for you when it comes to battling with, depression, anxiety, stress, just period, anything? What is something that has worked for you self-care wise that you feel other gentlemen may be able to benefit from?
I can, all right, I'll start. Whenever it gets awkward and quiet, I feel a need to talk. Sorry. For me personally, it's like, and again, most of my issues were depression and anxiety, but when I was in my depressed states, it was the severity of depression. And so, I had a great therapist, and, and the most basic thing of, when I wake up in my morning, and it was when I'd wake up to this depressed reality, and it was almost the hardest time. And the simplest thing for me to do was get up, just get up. And, that became a great, not a motivator, but a great way for me to start attacking the day and getting out of, because when you're laying there, you're not doing anything, you're ruminating and making things worse. So get your feet on the floor, stand up, start getting the blood moving, can be as simple as that. As things were better, and, and my depression was, I'd say, better in control, and maybe more of my anxiety was flared up. A lot of the cognitive like distortions, addressing those, like fortune telling and catastrophizing, and acknowledging those right away. Like, as I'm thinking through and going, hey, Dave, stopping myself, what am I doing wrong? How do I self-correct, right? And those have been great. And it's just like, being told you don't go to the gym and work out once or twice and all of a sudden you're fit. So it's been one of these things that have just been a work in progress for me, but they have helped. Breathing techniques. There's a lot of different things to incorporate, and picking the ones that work for you or that you're actually going to stick with, I think, is the most important thing, right? I think there's a lot of different things you can do, but picking ones that you actually resonate with is kind of the key thing. But just doing something, because again, doing nothing, letting the thoughts build up, ruminating, letting things get worse in your head, like, is not the way to do it, to get there. So that's kind of my take.
I would also add, have an accountability partner. Find a guy that will be able to be there for you through the difficult times, somebody that you can share your struggles with. And, before you go to bed at night, text them your plans for the next day. Hey, I'm going to get up at this time. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to run these errands. And then know that they're going to check on you the next day, and check in with them by text or by phone call. Hey, I'm having a rough time, and get some words of encouragement from them. Hey, man, let's meet for coffee. Let's go to lunch. And sometimes, get a kick in the butt from them. Hey, you need to get up and get moving. Let's go. But as men, we do that really well in certain situations. Like if you're training for something physically, we have no problem being an accountability partner or a coach or a mentor for someone. But we kind of let that go when it comes to emotional. And so, yeah, identify someone like that and enlist their help.
Yeah, having a support system to fall back on has been very helpful too. It's been my wife personally, so yeah, shout out to her.
For me, yeah, I like all those ideas. I do a little bit of all of them. In addition of blocking myself in my little home studio and playing until I get tired, singing until I can't talk. My Winter Circle Peer Support Network brothers, I can call them anytime. And these are men who have similar struggles. We all have the substance use histories in common, but most of us have co-occurring issues as well. So I'm grateful to have them to lean on. It ain't easy to find men that'll openly talk about feelings and stuff, and being vulnerable. Or we also hold each other accountable. When our mess starts smelling, um, somebody will tell us about it. And because we'll get depressed. I've gotten depressed sometime behind something I did. I'm blaming somebody else, but I'm sad behind my own mess. So they would tell me about my mess, and when I own it, then I start to feel better. So I have these guys to lean on, and I too have a wife too, who's leaning on me right now, telling me to hurry up home because I'm out of town. I was giving a commencement address at a prison, and then I wanted to leave there, and she said, "No, you bring your gun home." So that's what So I'm on the Zoom with you guys, and that's why my camera's off because I'm driving. And this meeting's even soothing too, to hear men talk like you guys talk. So I'm really grateful for this little space right here.
Yeah. Well, Jerome, I want to let that segue into another question. What role can women, not just your wives, but other women, even therapists, right? We're here to learn from you all too. What can we do to support men's mental wellness? I mean, Dr. Demas and I, wanted to enlist you all to do this so we could reach out, so that people would know we were safe spaces. But what else can be done? What else do we need to hear as women and allies for men and their mental health? What do you need from us? You can be candid.
This is a loaded question.
Yeah.
I'll say one thing, if I use my wife's perspective, which I'm not sure if you guys had the same experience, but it was, I put so much pressure on myself to be the main breadwinner of the house, to provide, to, get the kids set up for the future. And when my mental health issues really kicked in, it made me feel useless. It made me feel like I couldn't do that. And I literally, I couldn't do that. And having a wife that, though she admittedly had no idea what I was going through, but saw that I went from, this Dave to this Dave, she knew there was issues, and just being there to, I know it's as simple as picking up the slack. Yes, she was holding me accountable, but she was also understanding, she was compassionate, and she took care of the kids for, I would say, almost a year through the worst of this, and taking them to all the soccer practices and doing stuff, because I mean, at the time, won't share a lot, but I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't I was barely holding the job I had. It was terrible. But having her become, and she always, don't get me wrong, she's always been the rock of the family. It just, but like to really fill that role, like was amazing. And for her to accept that I was at my weakest point and not lose faith in me and not show me any kind of love. And sometimes it would just be her hugging me and me laying there, even though I could feel no love, no any, it was just that, in the back of my head, like knowing she was there trying, just went a long way. From a therapist perspective, if I had to say, I don't know if this also is the segue, and I'm not sure if this is part of your question too, but like how could a female therapist help a male client? Um, I think just showing that same kind of compassion, like understanding that males are, I don't want to say most males, and we all come from different backgrounds, obviously, but like we're raised in, hey, you're the provider, you got to be the one that's making sure everybody's taken care of, and I guess it goes back to the Stone Age days of, we're the ones with the club out killing the food and bringing it home, and like, and it's just being compassionate to that level to realize, hey, we're not able to fill these roles. How, support us without maybe demasculizing us. Is that the right word? I feel like I'm killing that. Sorry,
Yeah.
but I think you know what I'm saying. I think that would go a long way. I know, Rochelle and I have had some good conversations, and she's been very supportive. And but she also is fully understanding that, mental health isn't it doesn't pick race, doesn't pick sex, it doesn't care who you are. It's there. And so having somebody that just looks at you as a brain that is chemically imbalanced that needs help, it goes a long way. So
Mhm.
Uh, okay, this is wife hour. My my wife has. I got the best wife. She watched her father have serious bouts of depression, and she tells me stories of how he'd be in a dark room for days and days and days. The mom would do everything. So, having had that experience, when I'm not feeling too cool, she's exactly what I need. Exactly. Because she said she'd go rub her father's temples. And so, I mean, she's just nurturing when I get like that. But for a female therapist, listening and still allowing a man to be a man, still letting him have his man ego, still, you know what I'm saying? That's what I mean. I think that would be cool because my wife still let me know I'm the boss. I'm just not too cool right now,
yeah.
She's still out here telling the dogs, y'all daddy got a headache, leave him alone, So just let us be still in charge, but right now we just need a little extra stuff. That makes sense.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, and I mean, as men, we are very much driven by our egos, right? I mean, we want to know that we're doing a good job. And when we're down like this, it kills us. Like when I can't be the protector of my family, when I'm not fully aware and alert because I'm depressed or anxious, it takes a real toll. It's not just the depression, but then the depression is compounded by my own, self-hatred at that point, right? Because I should be able to do this. I should be able to overcome this. And it's a big struggle. And so, if you can see the things that we're doing well in those moments and just appreciate that, give positive affirmations, that makes a big deal, makes a big difference. And not lying to us because we'll know when we're like, oh no, I'm not okay right now. Don't tell me I'm doing great. But if you can say, man, I'm proud of you for showing up to counseling today. Good job. It took a lot to get here. If you can say, man, I know it's hard, but just the fact that you went to work this week, that means a lot to our family. So yeah, if you can look for those things that we're doing well and affirm that, it really fills our tank up.
Yes, because if you don't, you will compound that Bobby Brown syndrome that we got already. Y'all know what that means? Y'all understand that, Bobby Brown?
Yep.
I get the reference.
I got it. I was gonna say for me too on that as well. The guys made a lot of good points, especially like the assurances, still getting that kind of praise and that affirmation. That's really good. But also the one thing that I felt helped in my relationship is because I'm always on the go and I'm always working and I'm always, doing things for my kids, that, when I need a break, that she actually provides me the break. And what that looks like sometimes is different. Sometimes it's, on Sundays, my only day that I typically don't work, she takes the baby to church with her, so I can literally have the house to myself and have 2 or 3 hours to, just decompress, whether, taking a nap, video gaming, whatever I do on Sundays, typically football when football season. But small things like that. And again, I'm very, I keep open dialogue with my wife. So she knows that I've had a bad day because I usually let her know when the bad days happened, and I call her, I'll text her, I'll tell her, had a difficult client, or, I had a back and forth with my mom about something, whatever. And if it's that bad, she typically gives me kind of enough time at home to kind of decompress, don't bombard me with the honey-do list, don't ask me to fix this right now. But we have an understanding where she's like, you can't just have the whole day to kind of just do that. I still need you to be dad and husband and, take care of responsibilities. So we had a compromise, and it's just like, give me hour and a half when I get home to relax, decompress. And then, if I get home at 5, by 7, I should be good to go, whatever you need me to do, whether it's helping with laundry, taking care of the baby. But just that open dialogue has really helped us to where I don't have to hold in that I'm having a bad day anymore. I feel safe now saying that here. She's provided me that safe space. So that's been my big, A+ with my wife. I've really appreciated that. And then again, to be fair, we're in a 5-year relationship, and it always hasn't been that way. That took some growing pains. But, I think, it really shows the level of love and why we wanted to work. We were able to do those type of things for each other. So that's really kind of opened our relationship up, because we've presented each other a safe space when we are having those rough days.
That's good.
Go ahead, Jaquita.
I was just going to say, does it, well, two things before I get to the next question. I attended a conference recently, and I guess it wasn't really surprising, but it was kind of the same thing. It was kind of like men, they were on a panel, and one of the questions were, getting women in their lives to support them better and be open about mental health and what that looks like. And so most of the men were saying what happens is that you all want to be more vulnerable with us, right? With women. But the fear now is it being used against them, and then you shut down all the way. And so now it's never coming back. And that plays a part in like destroying the relationship. So if I'm having a day and I express, hey, I'm sad, or I'm going through something, I'm this, I'm that, and then, the woman gets mad and she uses that against him, now he'll never open up again. And so then that kind of tarnishes the relationship. Would y'all agree? Is that something that y'all would say has been like an experience, or, even if you've had clients like that have experienced that, and how would men, is there something that they can say in the relationship? Like, hey, I'm trying to be vulnerable. Obviously don't use it against me, but like, how do you say that?
Now you want me to go into my bag. Man, I got a way of expressing to her. First of all, she's just super understanding. Again, haven't had her own experiences, but I know how to say, damn, baby, I ain't myself right now. I know how to say that without fear that she's going to use it against me. For me, I don't know what that would look like. I can't understand that perspective in my relationship. I guess it's different for everybody. But my wife like that. She like me to be soft. She like me to be soft. And sometimes, like last night, we were watching All Eyes on Me. And I've seen that movie 3 times. And I've cried 3 times. I can't even listen to Dear Mama on the radio. but she likes to put it on because she knows the relationship me and my mother had, and she knows it's gonna make me cry. She like that. She said, "Oh, baby," she likes that, and and it's cool. It's all right. I just wish other brothers had that luxury. You know what I mean? I got it. I ain't worried about her ever trying to flip the script and say, "Oh, you weak." No, nothing like that. I'm a gorilla. She know I'm a gorilla. And she allowed a gorilla to cry. She allowed me to cry. And it's cool. It feel good when I do it too. Feel good.
I could say I'm in the same boat. Different upbringing. I don't think my wife had any experience with like anybody in her family with mental health, but she just, we click and she's okay. Then I'm open and vulnerable, and I was afraid she would be. So I hid a lot of this stuff from her early in our marriage. We've been married on, oh gosh, I don't know, 20 years now, almost 20 years. So, but it took a little bit of me trusting and then opening up more and more. And, yeah, but I'm happy that I am there. So I can't say I have the experience you're describing, or if I had gone through it. And I'd feel terrible for somebody that had that, because anyways.
I've actually had that in relationships, and the number one thing it does is it breaks a level of trust you have in your partner. If you're opening up as a man, trying to be vulnerable about some things you have difficulty talking to, and that's later on used against you in a fight or an argument, or you're made fun of, it's very rare that guy ever feels safe opening up to you like that again. Yeah. And I feel like, in relationships, we should have that understanding when we're having it, but it often goes, untalked about like, hey, this is kind of something that I really struggle with. And I feel like if we approach it better when we're talking to our spouses or our partners about that, they may be more understanding of, let's not weaponize this against him when we're mad. But I do know it's happened to me in a previous relationship. And then I see a lot of couples too sometimes. And that is one of the source that is brought up of like, how can I be open with you when you make fun of me for it? Or you make me feel so bad about it, or you make me feel like I'm inferior. Again, it's to me, it's a betrayal of trust in a lot of ways when that has happened.
And in a lot of cases, you're never going to know that he's not going to do it again, because he's not going to tell you, I'm not going to open up. He's just going to do it, right? He's going to shut down, close that door, wall it off, build a brick wall, and he is never going to go there again because he can't trust you.
Well, I was going to say, as a therapist and as a female therapist that works with a lot of males, I see that in friends and my clients. And I often say that's not always a male problem. That's the female that needs some work on why she can't allow a male to have vulnerability and softness and, express himself. And I, usually say that's some toxic behavior. We need to evaluate this relationship, and also maybe some marriage therapy or relationship counseling, because that is not a safe space. And, I think we have to get males to understand that every female's not safe, just like for females, every male's not safe, right? That we've all had our experiences and we're all bringing that baggage forward. So yeah, I see it a lot as well as just as a female therapist.
I think that somebody earlier said something about education and having that education like available. And I think sometimes, and this kind of leads into the next question, it's different growing up for everybody, but a lot of the times the same unhealthy things that are being taught to males about how to be a man, it's the same thing that's being taught to women. If whether they have their dad or brothers in the house, or whether it's just in their community, they're still seeing people tell males, hey, you can't be this way, you can't be that way. So if you've never been taught the right way, now you have these women who's like, oh, he's not a real man, he's crying. Or like, oh, he, like he needs to suck it up, he needs to do this, he needs to do that. And it's like, that's not realistic. Like it's very unrealistic. And so what does that look like just across communities, period? Like what can we do to make therapy or men's mental health, period, like more culturally competent for men and women, period. Like how can we do that? Because again, everybody's experiences are going to be different. But again, like David said, it's not a matter of really orientation. It's not a matter of race. It's because it's an issue across the board. So no matter what community, what background you're coming from, it's still coming back to the same issue. Nobody knows. Everybody's just assuming, or everybody is basing it off, oh, well, this is how I was raised, so this is right. This is how I was raised. So, and I get that so much. People like, oh, I'm fine. Oh, well, I've made it this long and I'm fine. And it's like in my head, my therapist brain is like, but you're not fine. But that is what you've been conditioned to think, that you're okay because you've just been going through life like this until you get in a session and I say one word that's unrelated to anything and you break down because now you've been triggered because you don't realize what was already there. So like, how can we find something just culturally across the board that can help, that can kind of bridge that gap to get everybody to kind of be on board and understand the importance of mental health and what it's really, looking like.
I have a thought on this, and it's maybe an extreme example, so it's not going to be like something, but I pre-read all these answers, and I was like, one take I have on this is something I struggled with. I went through some therapy recently, and it was all for veterans. Like everybody was a veteran there, and I'm not. And it was so common for them to talk about all their problems, and out in the open. I said, oh man, this is great. It's like a whole community of people that are all going through similar things that can openly talk about it. And then I think back to like, I was sitting with my best friend in college, and I had started broaching, I was going through some issues. And I didn't say I was having the issues or whatever, but he goes, oh, and I won't use the language he used, this is college guys drinking. And he was like, oh, that's weak behavior. Man, that's all made up. People just need to suck it up and get over it. And we're still friends to this day. Like this is 25 years ago. And he has no idea that I have been battling this stuff for years. We live in different states now. And so, I guess my point being, it's hard to socialize this. It's hard to make this more available to people when it's like, I go back to my earlier comment of people, and maybe it wasn't actually my comment, but the other comment was made on just people not being educated on, that mental health everybody can have it. I mean, anybody can suffer from mental health issues. And it doesn't have to be like a veteran. It can be somebody that's, Joe Schmo, white collar worker who just has whatever, blue collar worker, anybody, right? Any race. And, I was struggling with like, I'd love to solve for it and say, how do you make it better? But it's like, unless we can go and I think better quantify, like this was another, and I hope I'm not getting off topic, but like, unless you could quantify, for example, you see somebody coming down the street in a wheelchair, they're missing both legs, and they got a bandage around your head. You're like, oh, man, that guy's got some problems, right? You can easily see it. You step out of the way, you hold the door for it. He can't do something. You go, hey, I get why he can't do it. You see a guy walking down the street and maybe he's fit, muscular, whatever. But at the same time, he's sitting there going, having panic attacks, just, oh my God, I'm out in public. Everybody's looking at me, da, da, da. Or struggle. Yeah, how am I going to kill myself tonight? Right. That's what's going through his head. But you look on the outside and he looks fine and healthy. And maybe he's with his wife and kids. And honestly, that's been me at some points, and how do you, like, when people don't see the issue that the person's going through easily, they tend to just write it off. Hey, he's making it up. Hey, it's whatever. And this is where I'm kind of like saying, I'm not sure you could even educate people enough that they would go and fully believe and understand when somebody says, hey, I have a mental health issue, and that's why I struggle with certain things and I can't do something. Because my next point here is also, men are very competitive. And if they look and see that and go, oh, that guy's just making it up, he's making it up an excuse for why he can't do something, like maybe that's like a whole nother like dynamic we have to get over. So I just look at it like there's all these variables of like, I don't think you can solve this problem without somehow solving for all of this. Men's own human nature to be competitive towards other men, people just only basing their judgments and on objective type results, like seeing somebody in a wheelchair missing legs and realizing, oh, hey, they must really have a medical condition, and not seeing like the mental health struggles they're going through. Yeah. So anyways, I didn't really answer the question, but that's where I read this one and I said, I don't know how to answer this. Like, I don't know how to provide a solution. I think it starts with education, and it starts with people just being compassionate and somewhat trusting that there are people that are going through this, whether they see it or not. So maybe not the answer you were looking for, but that's the best I got.
That's helpful. That's
Oh, yeah, the invisible issues, right? The things, the invisible sicknesses that you can't see. Even with chronic illnesses, most people don't walk around and you can't see the autoimmune diseases. And we say that about those, is to be kinder than necessary. So I think you did answer it. Compassion, kindness, awareness that everyone has a struggle, and treating people accordingly.
And let me speak to this as an old guy, almost 60. Like growing up, nobody went to therapy unless you were legitimately crazy. Like, I mean, off the charts. Like, you had to be in the loony bin was the language that we would use back then, right? I mean, and nowadays, like, if you're not in therapy or if you're not in counseling, what's wrong with you, right? I mean, it's a trendy thing now, whereas growing up, it was not acceptable. It was very much looked down on, a sign of weakness. So I would say from where we came from 40 or 50 years ago, we're 1,000% better. And I think we're going to continue trending that way. It's just going to take a while. So I know for younger people, it's like, how do we get this moving? How do we get this going? Well, it's going, right? We've seen some big shifts in the last several decades. It's just how do we keep that going? And I would agree with the education side of that. I think that can be really helpful. But yeah, it's much better than it used to be.
And let me add also, the barbershop talk. We talk about everything in the barbershop. So we need to talk about mental health, like we talk about LeBron and Michael Jordan, who the best. Just spaces like that where everybody just chilling, just bring it up. We got to give exposure, like the news. They say something on the news, everybody takes it. So I mean, we need to start spreading the message, getting it out there.
Well, that's kind of what we wanted as, female therapists and, all of you guys to kind of help do. So we hope that we're accomplishing some of that today, because that was some of our thoughts as well, Jerome. And I guess, kind of our last question to close up is, does anybody have any advice as a man? As a therapist, I say, vulnerability is strength, exactly what Eddie said earlier. One of my clients taught me that. He said, what are the 3 hardest words a human could say? And as a therapist, I said, I don't know, I love you. And he said, absolutely not. He said, I need help. So asking for help is strength. It is a very hard thing to do, very hard words to say.
Yes.
But when you say that and you take those first steps, so that's the advice I would give to men in general when they're struggling, is that, and find your therapist. You may find a therapist that doesn't work for you. That's okay. You don't buy the first car you test drive. And I tell my clients that on the first session, if I'm not your person, I'll get to know you and I'll help you find your person. That's my job. So as therapists, to support your clients in finding that rapport, and as a client, just asking for the help, starting somewhere. That's my best advice to men who are struggling. What do you all think?
Like that.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And I mean, and for me personally, and I think for others on the call, if you're afraid to socialize it with your group, I love the idea of the barbershop talk, or you could throw in golf course talk, or whatever, hanging out with the buddies and somehow getting that socialized. If you're not comfortable with that, I would say at least start with your immediate family. Let's start with your significant other. If your kids are of an age where they can somewhat understand, don't be afraid to socialize with them. I think it's going to do, it's not just for you, or for the, I mean, it's for both of you, right? Because socializing it at that early age and making it not a stigma discussion that they go, oh, what's wrong with dad? And mom, says, he, whatever, like explain it to them yourselves. It's been very awkward for me, but I'm kind of glad I did. I don't know if they fully understand, but at least, I don't know. Like I said, for me, it was almost therapeutic too, because now I know they will feel comfortable talking about it with me later. That's the only other piece of advice I have.
Well, not only with you, but they'll feel more comfortable talking about it with their spouses one day.
True. Yeah.
More comfortable talking to their friends about it.
Yeah.
We just got to make it hip. Make it hip.
That's true though, especially for the generations that are coming. I even think about the generations coming after me. I think that's very important because that's something that I do a lot. I try to go into spaces, into the neighborhood even that I grew up in, where I know mental health wasn't a thing. Like not even a little bit. And I know in most households it wasn't, but it's like in my community, it was like, you crazy. You tell your parents you're depressed. Oh, get your depressed stuff and then wash some dishes. Oh, you ain't depressed. Oh, you just want to do this.
Yeah.
And it's just like this thing. And so again, everybody feels like they're okay. And it was always a thing of, if I wasn't saying, I'm just ignoring you saying you're depressed, it's like, oh, you just need to pray. You just need to go to church. And so I get that a lot, especially in the African American community. And I always say, well, if we believe in God, if that's what we're going to go with, let's believe that he put the therapist here for a reason. He put us here to help you. So go to church. And when you get out of church, come see me, so I think, getting in the community and talking about it. And again, these younger kids, they don't know. They're more open to it for sure. But it's going to take somebody, actually going out there and them not just saying, hey, my parent has picked a therapist for me. Let me just sit in front of them, because truly that's not how it always works. Like sometimes they need to pick too. They need to be able to vet. This is somebody who they're telling their deepest, darkest, secrets to. And so I think that, that can help. And especially for young boys, especially, for men, having more therapists that they can go to. I don't want to go talk to a woman, but lately I have seen a lot more male therapists, which is amazing. But I think also that that's needed, just going into these communities and having that representation. I've gotten so many kids to come to therapy just because of how I look. They haven't even talked to me, but I look relatable to them. I go in there, I'm not stuck up. If they're in a session, we're just talking, kind of like Andrew said, we're having a conversation. Sometimes the icebreaker is my tattoo. They're teenagers. Like, oh, okay. They're immediately relaxed, and so it's like, oh, when I was going through school, that was a thing that my professors were telling me may have been an issue. Like, it wasn't super professional. But what has happened now is it has helped so much because so many people feel comfortable because I look like I'm comfortable. I could be horrible, but to them, it's just that approach. So me going into the community and finding people and finding kids, and sometimes even saying, hey, they probably could benefit from like speaking to a male, because I could help, but the representation, so I think that definitely, would help as well. Thank you all so much.
Have any other advice for struggling men who are maybe on the verge of thinking about therapy or wanting to reach out?
Well, for me, when I talk to, go ahead, man.
No, go ahead, Mr. Barber. Go ahead.
When, like, one of the reasons that I go to the prison every week, and every other week I'm at a graduation or something, is I make jokes about my own journey in mental health. I make jokes about it, like, where it's hip, it's cool to have that issue and to be dealing with it. And it makes some of them smile. I see them, and I see that they're connecting with me on that. We used to play what we call the cuckoo role. The cuckoo role is when you get arrested, you act like you cuckoo so you can get out of trouble. That used to be the thing. But now they ain't playing the cuckoo role. now guys are really starting to see, hey man, I might need to talk to somebody because I wouldn't have had these problems in the first place. And so I spread that message that, hey man, no matter what you're going through, it's somebody there to help you. Like Dr. Demas said, you know, the barbershop, you get a haircut. You know, the sweeper, he's perfect for what he does. You know, and so the therapist is there for a reason too. And so I tend to promote that. Hey man, I'm cuckoo. I went to prison 5 times. I had to be cuckoo. But once I come to grips with it and start getting help and talking about it and learning about it, now I'm better. You know, and guys start to see how they, you know, they start to relate to that in their own lives. So having peers go out with this message is priceless. It's priceless. Thank you. That's all I want to share.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, and then for those who are on the fence about coming to therapy, I usually tell people, you know, therapy is kind of an investment in yourself, and you're worth investing in yourself. And you should invest in yourself first beforehand. I mean, you're no good to anybody else when you're not investing in yourself and you're dealing with depression, anxiety, anger. And so just that really, you know, it's the hardest step is usually that first one. The most difficult session is usually the first one. The most awkward session is usually the first one. But after the first one, it's a lot easier. And again, they realize it's the conversation, like I said. And again, I know for me, being Hispanic in Dallas really helps me. Being covered in tattoos and Hispanic in Dallas really helps me. And so it offers, you know, relatability. You know, I also tell them I've been married and divorced twice. I have to deal with custody issues with ex-wives all the time. I have to deal with conflicting, you know, mothers here and my wife here. You know, these are every life things that I deal with. I'm not immune to those type of things. And I also tell them I'm not immune to bad days. As your therapist, I promise you I'm going to have a bad day too. And so again, I hold myself accountable with what I'm going to teach my clients, that I use it in my everyday life. So just that, you know, the first step's always the hardest. That's the truth. You know, I relate it back to the first time I went to the gym. The first walking in the gym for the first time was the hardest, and now I love the gym. But it took me 6 months to actually start loving the gym. And again, it might not be that for therapy, but you know, it's worth it. The investment was worth it. So.
Well, we just want to personally thank all of you for, one, giving up your time on a Saturday and being patient with all our issues today, and for helping us bring this to fruition. A vision that we had together and something that we feel is very near and dear to our hearts and needed for the men in our lives, and you know, our families, brothers, cousins, dads, and partners, and you know, just being here, giving your time, giving your feedback. And we hope that we can put this out there to help someone. If we help one person, I think it'll be, you know, worth our time and effort. So we just want to thank you for that. And Dr. Demas, do you have anything else to say? And thanks to Eddie for helping, you know, coming in and helping us out.
That's it. I just want to say thank you guys. Again, I think that, you know, the responses and the things that we discuss is really needed, is really going to be helpful. I know that, you know, once we are able to get this out there, there is somebody that needs to see it. And, you know, like she said, one person is enough. And I think that's the big thing. I just, you know, mental health is, a lot of people are struggling, but a lot of times I feel like men, they just go unnoticed because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to sit in the background and just be strong. And so, you know, I feel like as women, us, you know, trying to put something together like this is just another sign to show men like, hey, like, we get it. We all aren't, you know, oblivious to the fact that you all struggle too. Because we can see it, you know, we can feel it. And so just making sure the men understand that that safe space, you know, is there. And just being able to hear from different perspectives as well is going to be helpful to someone. So I really, really appreciate everybody for coming on. And I don't know if it's going to let me send it all at one time, but I'm going to figure that out so that I can get this out to everybody. So again, that you all could have and or share at your leisure. And so, yeah, again, just thank you so much for attending.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
All right.
Bye,
Take care.
everyone.
Great weekend.
See ya.
Bye-bye.